There are questions that are not born from superficial curiosity, but from a deep tension between the visible and the invisible. And this is one of them. Because if we accept that Jesus truly died, then the inevitable question is not only how did he die, but where was he while his body lay in the tomb? To answer that, modern imagination is not enough. We must enter the mental geography of the first century, how the ancient world understood reality after death. And that map looks nothing like ours. Today, when most people hear the word hell, they imagine eternal fire, conscious punishment, and a single place of condemnation. But in the biblical world of the first century, the language was far more complex, nuanced, and above all, structured. For ancient Jews, the world of the dead was not a simple concept. It was an invisible geography, a layered realm, a place everyone went, but not everyone experienced in the same way. That place was called Sheol. And in the Greek world that influenced New Testament language, that same concept is translated as Hades. They are not exactly identical in cultural terms, but they function as equivalents, the place of the dead, the invisible domain where the souls of the departed await their final destiny. Now pause on something important. Sheol was not originally conceived as a place of exclusive torment. It was the common destiny of the dead, righteous and wicked, kings and farmers, prophets and sinners, all without immediate distinction entered this realm of the invisible. But they were not all in the same state. Here is where ancient cosmology becomes more complex. Because within Sheol, Hades, Jewish tradition developed the idea of compartments or regions. It was not a uniform space. It was structured. And within that structure appears one of the most fascinating images in Jesus' teaching, the bosom of Abraham. To understand this, we must go to a parable that has been read thousands of times, but rarely as what it truly is, a symbolic map of the afterlife. The story of the rich man and Lazarus. A rich man lives in extreme luxury, while a man named Lazarus lives in absolute misery. Both die, and then something strange happens in the narrative. The rich man does not simply cease to exist, he is in torment. Lazarus does not simply cease to exist, he is in comfort, and between them there is a great chasm that cannot be crossed, and Lazarus is in the bosom of Abraham. This expression is not accidental, it is not sentimental, it is structural. In first century Jewish imagination, the bosom of Abraham represents the place of rest for the righteous within Sheol, a space of comfort, waiting, and security, under the figure of the patriarch Abraham as a symbol of covenant and promise. Meanwhile, another region of the same realm of the dead is described as a place of torment, two realities within a single invisible geography, and a fixed separation between them. Now comes the key point. Hades is not the final destination. It is an intermediate state, a temporary condition, a place of waiting before final judgment. This completely changes how we read Christ's descent, because if Jesus truly died, and if biblical language is consistent with its context, then his soul does not vanish into nothingness. It enters that same realm, the realm of the dead. But here a deep theological tension arises, because not everyone who enters Hades does so in the same condition. And the question becomes unavoidable. In what condition does Jesus enter? As just another among the dead, or as someone entirely different? To answer that, we must return to one of the most important distinctions in the New Testament that is often confused: Hades and Gehenna. Hades, as we said, is the realm of the dead. Gehenna, however, is something different. Originally, Gehenna was a real valley, the Valley of Hinnom, associated with practices of judgment and later used as a symbol of final judgment and condemnation. In Jesus' language, Gehenna represents the ultimate eschatological destiny of separation from God. It is not the intermediate state, it is final judgment. Here lies a common modern confusion, assuming hell always means the same thing throughout the Bible, but it does not. In the first century, the language distinguishes between Hades, the place of the dead, the intermediate state; Gehenna, final judgment, ultimate destiny. This is crucial, because if we mix these concepts, we lose the precision of the biblical text, and we also lose the depth of the three-day event. Now return to Jesus. When his body is in the tomb, his soul is not suspended into nothingness, nor does it cease to exist. It is in the realm of the dead. But the question is not only where he is, the question is how he is there. And here the mystery intensifies, because there are two possible readings within historic Christian theology. First, Jesus enters Hades as any human being would, fully sharing in human condition, identifying with death to its deepest level. Second, Jesus enters Hades not as a prisoner, but as authority, not as one subject to the realm of death, but as one who invades it. And here, the biblical narrative begins to lean in a surprising direction, because several New Testament texts suggest that Christ was not passive during those 3 days. He is described as proclaiming victory, as disarming powers, as confronting invisible spiritual realities. This is not victim language, it is conquest language. And if that is the case, then the 3 days are not a pause. They are an operation, an incursion into a domain previously understood as irreversible. But we must be careful, because the biblical text does not give us a detailed map of the underworld. It gives images, symbolic language, theological visions. It is not trying to satisfy geographical curiosity about the spiritual realm, but to communicate authority, and that authority is expressed in a central idea. Death does not have control over Christ. Now think about this from the ancient worldview. For a first-century Jew, Sheol was the unavoidable destiny. For a Greek, Hades was unavoidable reality. For Roman thought, death was the end of human power. But the Christian message enters that system and breaks it from within. It does not deny the existence of the realm of the dead, but it declares something radical. There is one who enters it and is not retained. That transforms the entire invisible geography. Because if Hades is a universal prison, then everything inside it is subject to its laws. But if someone enters who cannot be contained, then the structure itself fractures. And here the figure of Jesus changes completely. He is not a lost soul among others, not another spirit in the realm of the dead. He is the only one who enters with inherent authority. This leads to a powerful image. If Hades is a closed realm, then Christ's entry is not a visit, it is an invasion. And if it is an invasion, then the 3 days are not absence, they are occupation of enemy territory. But there is more. Because Christian tradition does not only speak of descent, it speaks of proclamation. This implies that something communicative happens in the invisible realm. An announcement, a declaration, a verdict that does not depend on the system of death. And here the language becomes even stronger. Because if Christ proclaims within the realm of the dead, then death is no longer absolute silence. It becomes a space where the authority of God also resounds. Now return to the disciples. They see none of this. For them, the body is in the tomb and the world is silent. But silence is only from their perspective. Because in another dimension, history is being rewritten. And here lies a tension running through the entire biblical narrative. What is visible looks like defeat, while what is invisible is executing victory. The bosom of Abraham is no longer merely a waiting place. Hades is no longer a stable domain. Death is no longer a closed system. Something is happening within the very structure of invisible reality. And that something has a direction, not downward, but toward transformation. Because the point is not only to understand where Jesus was, the point is to understand what happened to the system where he was. And if the New Testament is consistent, the answer is unsettling. The system did not remain unchanged after his entry. Now think carefully about this. If someone enters a prison and the prison's authority cannot stop him, then the prison ceases to be what it once was. That is what is at stake here. The 3 days are not merely a stay in the realm of the dead. They are the moment when the realm of the dead is confronted from within by someone who does not belong to it. And that changes everything, because death is no longer the end of the story. It becomes the stage where the story is reconfigured. The ancient world had a map of the afterlife, but Christianity does not simply adopt that map. It redefines it from the center. And the center is not a concept, it is a person. Jesus is not merely someone who passes through Sheol, who passes through without being retained. And that means something profound. It means that even invisible geography has limits when it encounters the authority of Christ. And if that is true, then nothing, not even death, can claim absolute sovereignty.